We're live.
Hello, everyone. This meeting is being conducted with a virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the board virtually may join the meeting online at the link in the agenda or by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering the webinar ID 8104-7552190. When the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raise hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. And when the chair calls your name to provide public comment, if you are participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Any emails received by 4:30 p.m. today were forwarded to the PSAB. Emails received after 4:30 will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Deputy City Manager, Ms. Thomas, can you take roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Wang.
Present.
Vice Chair Tang has provided advance notice of an absence due to illness. And so if there's general consensus for that, that would be deemed excused. Member IR?
Here.
Member Brodowski?
Here.
Member Frank?
Here.
Member Langton?
Here.
Member Souter?
Here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to minutes approval. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the meeting minutes? All right, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
I second.
And Ms. Thomas, can you take a vote, please?
Yes. Chair Wang?
Yes.
Member IR?
Yes.
Brodowski?
Yes.
Member Frank?
Yes.
Member Langton?
Yes.
Member Souter?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Tang absent. This motion carries 6-1. I'm sorry, 4-1.
6-0-1.
I'm trying to get my council and my numbers together. Yes, 6-1.
Thank you. Item 4 is oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the advisory board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the PSAB from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have two. First, we have Bruce England.
Thank you, Chair. Bruce England speaking for MVCPRA, which is a community group that deals with public safety matters of all kinds, including what you all talk about. So we just have one item, very short here, but we had some questions about the extremism ad hoc committee's recommendations, and part of our discussion was about how useful it is for any of your ad hoc committees to provide something equivalent to city council study sessions where you have the opportunity to review a topic and come up with some questions and concerns and so on before you actually delve into the topic at hand. We have a sense that sometimes it can be overwhelming if a topic is huge, and an ad hoc committee brings a lot of material all at one time, and then you're trying to digest it all and coming up with meaningful and valuable questions with just that one shot at it. So again, just the concept of duplicating something like city council study sessions might be useful to you, but that's something that you would need to decide yourself. So it's just a suggestion from us. Thank you.
Next, we have Tim Kenzie.
Hi all, Tim M, he, him pronouns, Montaloma neighborhood. Hope you're all doing well. Good to see you. Sorry I can't be there in person. I'll just want to note that City Council just approved spending a whole bunch of money on a new public safety building. And I find it a little strange that PSAB, the Public Safety Advisory Board, wasn't involved in commenting or reviewing or having any say on it. But I will note that my understanding is that the new building is not just a police building, it will also house the fire department, and it's taking a more expansive view of public safety beyond policing people with guns showing up to things. And I know that there's been calls from community members in the past to expand staff on to include a liaison to the fire department or other versions of public safety. And it seems given what happened with the new building that's coming up, it seems council is endorsing that sort of vision, that there's an expanded vision of public safety beyond just the police. And think that's something for PSAB, something worth considering for PSAB. Thank you.
That's it. All right. We will now close oral communications and move on to discussion and action items. To facilitate participation by all PSAB members, I will be recognizing each in turn. I'll be recognizing in turn each member who signals they are ready to speak. After all members who wish to speak on an item have done so, I will recognize members who have additional comments. All right. Let's start on item 5.1, Trust Program Update from Momentum for Health. Trust Community Collaborator Paula Giannoni will present the item for Momentum for Health.
Awesome. You said my last name correctly. That rarely happens. So yes, my name is Paula Giannoni. My connection is a little bit choppy on my side, so I turned off my camera. So I'm still here and I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be representing Trust today. And as mentioned, I am the community collaborator for the Trust North County side. I am part of Momentum for Health, and I'll be providing today's updates that we have for Trust. So let's get right into it. All right. So let's see. So tonight's agenda will cover the following. So we're going to go over highlights, call center activities, field team activities, outreach efforts, and then next steps. So we would like to recognize that we actually, our monthly call volume has been actually trending upwards since November 2022 when the program has launched. So we have seen progression even nowadays. We have seen a progression in the call volume. Compared to the prior quarter, where we provided an update for January to March 2023, we were able to maintain that same rate of dispatch, which is at 47%, and law enforcement involvement to 2%. So our program is not a program that responds with law enforcement. We do have a collaboration and partnership with the law enforcement for any case scenario, right? If a situation does escalate, but we have been very fortunate to be able to de-escalate majority of our calls. We also experienced a moderate increase of cases stabilized over the phone. So through the call center, when somebody calls, we have increased those numbers to be able to get stabilized over the phone. So from April 1st to June 30, 2023, there were 626 calls for service. Of these 626 calls, we have 2% that were escalated to law enforcement. We have 29% that were stabilized over the phone. So then that means that we had 62% stabilized within the community. So this slide shows the nature of the calls received through 988. So nearly 50% of the calls were dispatched to Trust. It is important to note that 988 call takers conduct the initial screening prior to transferring the call to the Trust call center. So most of the calls are being de-escalated through the phone. Occasionally, calls are transferred to Trust that do not meet eligibility criteria. As such, the category Other has been used to label calls that did not meet the criteria for service. That means if their level of crisis was either higher, right, and did not meet the criteria for that service. Another one could be including any wrong numbers, out of the county requests, or non-emergency crime reports or complaints. Trust call takers had to activate 911 5 times, which was a 0.8% between April and June 2023, directing 1 call for service at 0.16%, and to EMS of 4 calls for service at 64% to the police department. The callback disposition that you see here, or service outcomes, indicate that a trust caller, a trust call intaker initiated the call. So in Q4, call takers documented 95 dispositions as callbacks, which could be care coordination, which is 47%, failed transfers or drop calls, which were at 23%, or unknown, that were at 29%. So the breakdown of callbacks reveal a variable nature of this call disposition, right? So as well as important insights to trust call center workflow. So the Santa Clara Behavioral Unit trust providers and the evaluators are working to better capture this critical component of trust, service, and activities. So this slide right here shows the breakdown of the dispatch units by territory for the period of April 1st and June 30th. So please note that this chart reflects 290 out of the 294 dispatch units due to some missing information. Compared to the prior quarter, there's a greater alignment between the services territories and dispatch teams. So we have North County that is overseen by Momentum, and then we have the South County that's overseen by Pacific Clinics. So this slide shows the service outcome for the dispatch field units. So apologies if the font is a little bit small and a little bit light, but here you can see that nearly 40% of individuals were stabilized in the community with new resources. I also want to note that a significant number of calls, 15%, in this report are missing service outcome information due to delays or other complications in the database production. So these cases are labeled as unknown by evaluators and mischaracterized trends in service outcomes. Additionally, police presence is not always initiated by trust. Some instances like MCRT, EMS, or the police department were activated, ultimately had a resolution within the field. During this period, some trust to conduct the 5150 assessments. We do have the capability of doing that, but we also have a collaboration with MCRT to be able to activate the providing services assessments. Now, as for outreach, so like I mentioned, I'm the community collaborator, and this is my essential piece of work with trust. And I'm actually just completed 6 months, so it's fairly new. We did not have a community collaborator prior to myself. So I want to say that we have been very much involved more within the 11 cities that we oversee. So as for outreach within that time frame of Q4, we were able to make outreach efforts to the key community locations, such as the Mountain View Library, Chamber of Commerce, and the Mountain View Community Center. So we also reached out in the San Antonio area, where all the department stores and restaurants are. We have met also with Chief Mike on June 30th, where we had a great discussion and we're able to get introduced to Captain Saul, who has led our relationship and our partnership moving forward. We will be a part of the MVPDX event and also the National Night Out. So this is just the beginning of the collaboration that we have been doing. As for Life Moves, we also collaborated with Marlin, and we were able to facilitate a presentation and also attend their resource event that happened on August 2nd. So as for next steps, we look forward to providing all the great data of the recent successes that we've had. Like I mentioned, it's 6 months in, so we only have more progress, more successes to be able to showcase, and we look forward to be able to share that with you in time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Giannoni, for your update, and I think we're all really excited to have a community collaborator at Trust, so thank you so much. Do board members have any questions before I open this item to public comment? Yes.
Hey, Paula, this is Kavita. Thank you so much for your presentation. I had a question about the 15% of the population who refuse service once trust was in the field. Can you talk a little bit about why people refuse service? Did someone else call and they didn't want it? I'm just curious.
No, yeah, that's a great question. So our program, it really goes with the saying of it's an at-will service, right? So we love to be the presence and be able to provide that space for somebody to be able to receive services or resources. But the truth of the matter is, most of the times, first-time engagements don't go as we wished or hoped they would go, right? So if there are callers that could be combined, right, of somebody calling within an unhoused, somebody's outside a library or outside a grocery store, right? So somebody calling on somebody else, they have that right to deny any services. So it's a combination of both, of either a family member calling for somebody else or a community member calling on an unhoused individual outside in the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Paula, for the update on these. I'm interested in knowing, do you have any idea of who is calling when they come in? Do you keep the data of whether or not it's the person himself who needs help is calling, or is it somebody else?
So we do keep the information internal. We go through the HIPAA, right, protocol to make sure that we are respecting everybody's privacy. So all of our clients have that right to have their privacy. So we do not share any information and internal information out unless they are accepting to do that. So, but we do have our tracking system that is able to retain that information.
Maybe you didn't understand the question. I just wondered, I have to have an idea, are half of the calls somebody else who's calling about somebody who he or she thinks is ill or needs help? Or maybe it's 20% of the calls and the rest of them come directly from the person who needs the help, or is it the other way around? Do you have a sense of that?
Apologies on that. It's the end of the day, so my apologies. Yeah, so I would say that the greater amount of calls have to be somebody calling for somebody else.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
Do you have any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Paula. Thank you for your presentation. This is Deva. So I'm wondering if there's a protocol for those who continuously refuse service when they're either them call or somebody who is near them call. Do you have repeated people that are calling, and if they just continue to refuse service? What's the protocol for that?
Yeah. So our protocol for all calls, not just non-responsive or denied calls, would be follow-ups. So if we do have the dispatch happen where we meet the individual at any location and they refuse service, either or we follow back by call, or if they are unhoused and we know that they are, visiting the same areas repeatedly on a weekly basis, we would make efforts to go the next week and do a visit and just start building that rapport. So there is attempts to be able to build that rapport regardless if they have denied services, because we have had situation where individuals decide, maybe the third time around that they meet us, they are more willing to be able to receive services. So we do that with responsive clients as well. So if we have given resources to a client, we follow up to make sure, how did those resources go? Do you need any additional, services? Do you need any more support, right? Depending on exactly what happened, we're able to troubleshoot that conversation, but we do that follow up regardless.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That work. It's really awesome.
You have any other?
I have one.
Yes.
Paula, could you tell me if when a trust team responds, those services are basically provided through the community, and that initial interaction is it's kind of free to the person that's being treated? And when do you get to a point that mental health insurance comes into play?
Great, great question. Yeah, so our program is free of charge. So that means that we come to you, there's no service fee, there's nothing like that. If you need transportation to, the crisis unit or anything like that, there's no charge in any of it. Now, when it comes to the resources and services that we provide for the individual, it varies depending on the partnerships and the relationships that we have built within the communities, right? So making sure if we have any internal with Momentum, since Momentum has a lot of services already within our nonprofit, we can definitely be able to do any services within Momentum. And if that doesn't happen, and then we have to be able to do a third party, right? So like, is there any services available that are within your price range, right? So it all depends on case to case scenario. So that's why in my position as a community collaborator, that is my essential goal too, is to build these relationships so we can start thinking about free resources and resources that make sense for our populations all out. Senior communities, unhoused, making sure that we do that. I think you guys are muted. I can't hear you. So sorry. Hello?
Hey Paula, this is Chief Canfield.
Yes. I can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. All right, let's see. Did that work?
It was like 3 years ago already. I still can't believe that. That's crazy.
Can they hear?
Yes,
All
we are live.
right. We're live.
We are.
Okay, we had some technical difficulties, but we're back. Is Miss Giannoni also on this?
No, nothing.
No audio.
Oh, they can't hear us?
Oh, yes, now they're saying yes. And then
Yay! They can hear?
yes, they're saying yes.
Okay.
Great. Oh,
Sounds good.
wonderful.
Are we
Thank you
sure?
for checking us.
Let me call Miss Giannoni and ask her to one second.
Thank you.
I'm really trying to say that last name properly. Yeah, I'm making sure I say it right.
We're all listening.
Okay, we are back on, and I think the audio is now working, just with a little bit of a lag. If you want to log back in. Thank you so much. See you soon.
I tell you, it's always something.
Yes.
There's nothing to hear.
At least it's hiding behind that.
You can probably still smell it.
All right. I think we're good.
Yay.
Thank you. We apologize, there were some technical difficulties, but we're back. I actually don't remember what we were.
We're
We're,
talking about
doing
insurance
questions.
and
The
Yes.
cost
the cost.
Questions,
on their
insurance.
resources, yeah.
Yeah.
When insurance
I
kicks
think
in.
she got most of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do you have further questions, Dr. Wallington?
No, I think she answered it clearly enough before she.
I did want to add a little bit more too to that question as well. So the answer, we do have case management also available for Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Los Altos. Anybody that resides there, right? So if an unhoused individual is in those 3 cities, we're able to provide 2 to 3 weeks of, one-on-one support. So that also comes into play, right? So the case managers can manage those conversations about any type of insurance questions, or also making accommodations to making sure that there's proper resources available.
Okay, can I do one follow-up?
Yes.
Do you partner with any, I don't know, like the state government or any Santa Clara County where they have programs where they can assist people that might not have insurance?
Yes. So since this is a county program, so this is a Santa Clara County program, there is resources within the county for us to be able to utilize. That would be more of a case manager answer, right? To be able to give you a little bit more in-depth answer. I can definitely provide that in a follow-up email with more context to see exactly what are the resources and services that we are given by the county to be able to provide for somebody who does not have health insurance or insurance in general.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, member.
I just have one question, Paula. Do you guys only provide services for people who call, or do you have any kind of patrolling operations?
Yes, we do actually. So we love our team. We have a 24/7 team, right? So that means that we have an team, PM team, and knock shift. So that means we're 24/7. So what are we going to be doing if we're not getting dispatched, right? So that's a great question. So what we do is we do visibility routes. So that's another component of my position, is making sure that we have areas to visit, right? So we connect within the community, because nobody knows better than the community itself about where are these areas where we see foot traffic, where we see areas of more unhoused individuals, or areas that we would like to pay attention to, right? So we have a list of all those different locations and organizations, churches, services, or distributions, food distributions. Where can we be seen? So since we just made a year, right, of launching, we want to be visible. At one point, I want somebody to see our van riding down the street and they know exactly who we are, right? Without really making any research. So with that said, we have to be visible. We have to show, a presence. So we do a combination of visibility routes And then we also do events. So if we see what's going on in the community, we're there. We're making sure that we show up, and it doesn't have to be a formal, you're in crisis. No, it's more of just giving the presence of trust in general. So great question. That's something that I'm very happy that we've been doing, and we have been accumulating those lists of all those hot spots of where we're going, where we're being seen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Thank you so much for your presentation. Kind of going back to, I think, something Joan said, do you happen to have any trends in kind of who's using the services? Of course, not the specifics, but any trends in terms of like age group or demographics that can maybe help us better direct resources or do outreach in Mount View, especially just like any data from, I guess, your the calls that you get or the dispatch.
Yeah, I think it will be a little bit difficult to give you on the spot data points just directly from Mountain View, but I can tell you from the 11 cities that we've been seeing, we have been seeing a traction more of young adults. So I want to say like 19 to 25, right? That have their parents calling on behalf of them, right? So like my son, my daughter is going through this, they're showing mental health symptoms, their mood is changing. It could be a variety of things within that spectrum of low crisis. So we have seen a little bit of a pattern there. And I would also say the senior community. So individuals that are more 65 and plus are also. But it's mostly the young adults that we have been seeing a little bit more traction.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. And kind of similarly, I saw earlier on your slide presentation that there was a piece of data around like callbacks for care coordination. And I saw that it was around like 15%. I may be wrong. That's off the top of my head, but maybe could you tell us a little bit more about kind of the extent of this? I know that you mentioned that there's case management in Mount View, Palo Alto, Los Altos, but kind of what cases get callbacks in terms like to help them coordinate care afterwards and which ones do not?
Yeah, so that goes a little bit in hand with the making sure that we follow up. So it's a little bit of consistency with that. So I know that since a good amount of calls get de-escalated through the phone already, they're able to build that report, and they're informed, be able to build that follow-up requirements, right? So I think it goes hand in hand with calls that get dispatched with us would get a physical or a call, right? Dispatch of following up. And then for the calls, if they do get de-escalated through the phone, that would be a service that would be in addition of calling back, making sure that the resources, services have been accounted for.
Thank you so much. And then just my last question. In terms of, there was some data around unknown service outcomes. I know that this program just started a year ago, but I'm wondering kind of what moving forward the plan is in order to kind of keep track of service outcomes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we are very new, right? And I would say I'm a sociology major, so this really irks me, right? Because I definitely want us to have the proper data points and make sure that we are providing, right, the community with all the information that is needed. With that said, I think our system right now is still troubleshooting exactly like what is being accounted for and what is not, right? So those I know that I mentioned that we do like visibility routes, right? Sometimes we do run into clients or possible clients, right? Out when we're out and about. So meaning, how do those communications in those clients, how do they get accounted for, right? We don't really have a system to be able to do that just yet. We don't have a system in our database to be able to accumulate those numbers to be able to say, yes, we had these many field encounters, right? These many individuals being accounted for and being supported and helped out in person. So there is some tweaking that has to happen. So I'm hoping that in our next report update that we provide, we're able to have that unknown number drop down, right? So we can get a more accumulative data points for you all, because I think it's very much valid and important to be able to see exactly what is happening with all these dispatches and what is the service outcome that's happening.
Thank you. Sorry, I actually have
No,
one more
no.
question.
Yeah, when you're done, yeah.
In terms of just regarding I think that was really helpful in terms of kind of keeping track of the unknowns. Just back to the follow-ups. I'm just curious how, I guess, what is the kind of metric, I guess, for follow-up? Like how much follow-up do people get? Or is it until like they're definitely connected to a service, or just kind of recommending them towards some places?
Okay, that is great. You guys are coming up with really great questions at such late at night. So I don't know did you guys all drink coffee? Oh, okay. So I will have to say that this is where the case management comes into play, right? So I think that for us, we aim to do 2 to 3 times follow-up, right? So sometimes we do have situations where nothing is really going anywhere, right? They still do not want to receive services. And at that point, we have to kind of, say we did the best that we could, right? But we try to aim to 2 to 3 follow-ups, and then really it just stays there. With our case management, though, we're able to have those 2 to 3 weeks of being able to provide that care and support throughout that week, that span. So that's why I really like to advocate for this additional service, because we don't have this in all of our 11 cities, and we don't have this in South County. We only have this for Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Los Altos. So it's a special, additional service that's free of charge, free case management for 3 weeks. Sounds lovely, right?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for the work you do. I think Member Frank has a
Yeah, I just had one question about, you have a very small number of cases that require a police involvement as well, it seems like, and it felt like, and forgive me, I don't mean to speak for the rest of us here, but it feels like most of us thought that would be the case, that they would be able to handle most of their work without the involvement of the police department, which is really cool. But the cases that do require the need of an officer, are those extreme cases, or are they just required for just out of an abundance of caution?
So I think it's a little bit of combination of both, but I will say that it has been situations where the de-escalation process was not successful, or it was not getting to the point where it needed to be, right? So if a situation does escalate, for the safety of our team, for the safety of the individual, right, and everybody around, we want to make sure that that is the first and foremost, right? With that said, we don't just call the police department and take off, right? No, we make sure that our client is being taken care of from beginning to end. So if we have to make that introduction transition, and we have had great relationships with the police department, especially Mountain View, to be able to have those conversations and be able to feel like, okay, we know that they are in good hands regardless, right? So we attempt to be able to do the best that we can on de-escalating, but if the situation does escalate, we have to obviously take precaution and make sure that everybody's safe.
So just to be clear, if you have to call PD, then you actually have to relinquish your role in the call, is that correct?
So we do stay there until we transition that client to the police once they're there. So yes.
Got it.
So we don't leave right after we call the police. We wait to make sure that the client is okay.
Got it. That's interesting.
All right. Great, thank you so much. Sorry.
We'll get to the public. I was curious if you had already initiated any sort of surveys with folks that you've interacted with, that you've treated, that you've responded to, in terms of their level of satisfaction with the service. It's kind of a weird thing, because they're, I can imagine people aren't happy that, in part of them are like thrilled that you came, and part of them are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this, I needed this level of service. So I was curious, how do you measure success and satisfaction with the folks you're trying to serve?
So I think that that is a work in progress right now, right? So we do have internal success stories to be able to, basically be able to say, okay, what is the outcome? What are the impacts that we're doing? But I feel at some point, yes, I do agree. We should have some type of, report back. Like, how was your experience with trust? How was your experience with the team? And what could we do better if it wasn't great, right? I think all those points are very much valid in making sure that we can provide that service because we want to be represented as approachable, as somebody that you can trust, as somebody that you can come to, right? So in order for us to do that, how are we going to get feedback if not from the actual clients that we've helped? So yes, so I will bring this back to Bindu and say like, hey, I think that we should, proceed with this and make sure that we are able to provide this more in-depth post logistics on exactly how the treatment has gone for the number of clients, both resources and services. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Awesome. All right, and now I think we will open this item for public comment. If so, would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have one, Tim McKenzie.
Hi all. First, thank you staff for working out the technical difficulties. Hybrid can have some bumps in the road, but it is great to still be able to participate, and it's much appreciated. I've tried to do hybrid meetings and had no Wi-Fi in the room, so we just had to only do it live. So thank you for the work that you've done on that. And thanks for this presentation. That was great. The data was awesome. I would like to ask that like the slides are put in an easily accessible place online, and just a minor suggestion, a dashboard of the data of like service through time, kind of like we had COVID dashboards through the pandemic. That could be something that would be really useful to keep track of things. And in terms of places for outreach, I know the Day Worker Center in Mountain View and the Community Service Agency. I think those are two other community places that might be worth considering going to. Thanks for the great work you do, and looking to see how it continues to develop.
Yeah, thank you so much for your feedback. We actually have made a connection with Day Workers in Mountain View with Maria Markin. I believe I'm probably butchering your last name, but we have set a meeting to be able to communicate and see how we can work together. So thank you so much for your input.
Thank you. It seems like we have no more public comment, and so I will now bring this item back to PSAB for discussion. Do any board members have comments? Yes.
I just wanted to comment on Tim's comment. I do like the idea of a dashboard so we can see progress over time, maybe more easily. So Paula, if that's a possibility, as you and or Bindu present to us in the future, I think that would be great. And then we can really more easily follow the success and the growth of trust over the development in the next year.
Yes, that sounds like a plan. I can definitely be able to provide that in our upcoming meeting update. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Giannoni, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Good night. All right, now moving on to item 5.2. Police Chief Mike Canfield will present on this item. Mike and Deputy City Manager Thomas will be available.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just stand up to grab the remote control clicker if possible. Michael, we did not coordinate this in advance.
It's ready for you. Making sure I can share this. It's being.
Okay. And as you see, this is a presentation on the proposed calendar schedule for 2024. And this, of course, unlike a work plan, this is a calendar year schedule. Just for a little bit of background, the schedule is based similarly on last year's schedule. During the 2023 calendar year schedule, the board was scheduled to meet a total of 7 times. There was one opportunity when the board was not able to meet a quorum, which was in, I believe it was the first in-person day in March. So there were a total of 6 meetings in 2023. Obviously, all meetings since that March meeting in 2023 are required to be in person, with the exceptions being denoted in the staff report. But the challenges of in-person meetings as well as staff time and staff capacity and the ad hoc work committee were designed to be balanced with this schedule. So the goal is to strike a balance of meeting the robust work plan, but also giving time for ad hoc committees as well as staff to do that committee work and their primary functions. That requirement for us to have this calendar year schedule is part of council rules 8.2. And as I alluded to before, this is really designed to strike that balance between the ad hoc work committee's time to work on these items. It was denoted in the past that there was a desire to have more time to work on committee work, at the time subcommittee work. So it's designed to create more time for that, but at the same time, allowing for updates at every PSAB meeting, which was both public and board comment and request. Staff feels that this does strike the right balance, especially given the opportunity for up to 3 forums on the future of community policing, which could be, an additional 3 large-scale meetings, could bring the total to 10 meetings in the calendar year. As the board will see in the next slide, if there's interest in combining meetings, staff's recommendation would be that January and February are combined to meet in February, but certainly that is up to the preference of the board. And with that, I'll jump to the proposed schedule. It is in both the staff report, but also up on the slide. And I'll just go over the highlights of it. Some of these items here are truly married to other city goings on. So budgetary requirements of the city, schedules that are already in place and that are much more robust than just the police department, for example, require finance, city manager's office, and city council schedule, such as the budget, quite frankly, but also items similar to the 481 report that need to go to council. Those need to be planned out and scheduled around a more robust and significant scheduling council plan. Other items, when you look at staff work, twice yearly reporting, those have more flexibility. And certainly if it's the interest of the board, those can be adjusted and moved around, fairly freely. As you'll see on the proposed meeting calendar, ad hoc committee updates are included in every meeting. And I know I mentioned that already, but it is, something that has been brought up numerous times, and certainly is something that we are intent on scheduling and building into all of the schedules. That's my last slide, but I'll go back to the schedule and then just turn it over to discussion. Student Chair.
Thank you so much. This will start off. Do any board members have questions before I would open this item to public comment? I just want to say this can be for clarifying questions, and we can talk about discussion towards the after public comment. I think that might be helpful. So any clarifying questions right now, and then we can have the discussion after public comment.
One clarifying question I have is, you said some of the items, Chief Mike, are tied to budget and schedules. Could you remind me what those items are?
So things that are difficult to move around too much, it's budget, specifically the presentation on the budget.
Okay.
And that should be April. And then 481 which, I'm sorry, it's military equipment annual report, but it's Assembly Bill 481. Those are both challenging to move, and quite frankly, I don't think that we can move the budget presentation. Potentially, we could review looking at moving the military equipment. The SRO report could be moved some, but it really needs to mirror a school calendar. So I suppose we could move it backwards, but we really can't move it forward.
Sorry, which way is backward and which way is forward?
We could move it later in the year,
Yeah.
in the school year, or later in the year, but we could not move it before the school year were to end. Thank you for the clarification. The annual reporting, the preference is to have it earlier in the year, but it is not as rote as, say, the scheduling related to budget.
The annual report,
Yes.
the preference is to do it earlier.
Earlier in the year, as it's an, it's a
Oh, this is
presentation
the fiscal, earlier in the fiscal year?
earlier in the calendar year.
So earlier than it is now,
Or
or
keep to maintain it and
Got
keep it where it is on the front end of the year and not later in the year, because it's an annual report for 2023. So my preference would not be to report it at the end of 2024.
Okay, because it's in June now.
Yeah.
Which is right at the beginning of,
This is a calendar year, not a fiscal year.
it's in the middle of the calendar year. And that's considered early.
I don't want it to go any later than where it is. And because of the breakup with the meetings earlier, April being the kind of last of the early meetings, it does present some challenges for the annual report in June. But if you look at that April meeting, it was the feeling of staff that stacking too many in April would be cumbersome, but quite frankly, the annual report will likely not be done any sooner than then. In fact, April would be the soonest that it would likely be prepared for presentations.
Right.
Thank you. I actually have a clarifying question on the PSAB ad hoc committee recommendations. I know this is on kind of the agenda, but just to clarify, on the recommendations regarding form of future of community policing, are those recommendations of like what the forums are like, or is that like kind of post forum, taking all that information and providing other recommendations?
So if it pleases the chair, I have the staff report from last month or last meeting, which was for everyone's to refresh your recollections. It was October 26th meeting, and there were 2 items as part of that was for the work plan, which is the fiscal year work plan 23-24. And 2 items that were voted and approved were to create an ad hoc committee on youth substance abuse trends, and the other was an ad hoc committee to provide recommendations on forums covering broad topics of community policing. And the goal was to include, if you don't mind me reading, was to identify community groups that desire to participate in such forums, propose a recommended format and locations, seek community input and suggest forum content and topics, help promote event attendance, and provide update and recommendations to the PSAB for consideration. So I think those items would need to come back to the board and then be placed into effect. So it wouldn't be an after action, if you will, but it would be that work that would then be presented.
Okay.
Those recommendations, those bullet point 5 recommendations that I read would be what would be presented. It wouldn't be it was the follow-up from the work of the presentations.
Right, so these would be before the listening
Correct.
focus groups happen.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anyone else have? Yes.
I have one other question. In the February meeting, Chief, is that 1 or 2 items, or is that 1 item? Because in the
Yeah, so Member Frank, so it is the PSAB recommendations. It is 1 item, the recommendation on bias and policing, and that should not be a bullet point. It should be just follow up on the report and timelines as requested. And then the other item would be the subcommittee updates.
Okay.
So that both January and February are fairly light months. So that's why that when we were looking at if there was an interest in combining, those 2 make the most sense to me.
Any other clarifying questions? All right. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have one, Dana Petey.
Dana?
Hi, everyone. Dana Petey, Mountain View resident, member of MVCPRA. First of all, we want to say thank you so much for this tentative agenda list. It is so clear, easy to follow. We know it's not, set in stone or anything, but it is so nice to see a general layout of what to expect on each month. We think it's going to be super useful for honestly all of us to keep track of what's the work and what comes up when. So thank you so much for putting this together. We appreciate it. We're curious how we can continue to make sure it stays visible and easy to access. We saw there was a mention of putting it on the PSAB website. I don't know if there's any way to link it almost as like an aside or a footnote or in that FYI section at the top of the agenda with just general information available to the public. But I know a lot of folks go straight to upcoming city meetings and download the agenda file. Just whatever we can do to make sure it stays easy to access would be great. I don't know if other organizations like City Council or other advisory bodies have set any kind of precedent about where and how they manage their tentative agendas that we could follow. But thanks again for putting that together. We also are really excited to see that every meeting references those ad hoc committee updates, because we agree that, regular updates on those committees is also going to be incredibly helpful for knowing just what's the status of the work, which committees have ongoing work, which committees have closed. So thanks again for building that in. And I appreciate Chief Canfield's specific language around having it built in, because that's so important. At one point, I know the idea got floated of maybe having committee members talk about their updates in item 6 kind of unofficially, but I want to highlight that having it as a specific agenda item, I think, is a useful degree of sort of institutionalizing it, so to speak. I worry that if it's just an item 6, maybe every member of the committee assumes somebody else is going to talk about it, or someone's absent, or it'd just be easy for the ball to get dropped, so to speak. So thanks again, Chief Canfield, for mentioning that the committee updates could happen in every meeting. And we hope that they would be an official agenda item, even if the update is no updates, we haven't met, though we certainly hope that you will have met. And yeah, thanks again. And we just really look forward to seeing all this work happen in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have additional comment? All right, I will now bring this back to the PSAB for discussion. Do any board members have comments? If not, we'll also start.
I guess it feels obvious to combine these two meetings in January and February. But also, Chief, is there any opportunity to maybe add something to that meeting if we were to combine it to make it a slightly meatier meeting than just the two items?
It would be the preference if we were going to add a meeting that we did combine those January and February meetings. But certainly there are some limitations, and I would probably need to defer to Ms. Thomas for larger city calendar issues. So please don't let me step on any landmines.
Fine, no, you're doing fine.
But yes, there is some capacity. I'll note that during the summer months, City Council takes 2 months off, and there are significant demands on city staff, both with, that is a time when many city staff are away, so we can't get as much done. So if we're going to add in, I would say those summer months would be the wrong months to add.
No, you're marching down a path I'm not bringing it. I was saying if we were going to combine the January and February meeting, is there another item that we can add to that meeting?
I apologize. In that case, I don't.
I know that might need some thought, because
Certainly,
staff would have to prepare for that.
We could examine and look and see if there's a recommendation for what to move, but there is potential to move items. I suspect that there may be potential for the ad hoc committee on community forums and the future of community policing to be bumped up sooner. I'm hearing that there's some interest in that committee to get to work, quite frankly. So that may very well be an area for some substantive increase.
Thank you.
Say something?
Yes.
I would personally support combining the meetings if it was moving to February, because I won't be here in January.
You won't be here in January?
Yeah.
Well, excuse us.
Why is that?
I have to work in January.
I'm sorry, I have a vacation to go on.
I have a comment. I think we're combining the meetings for January and February. And I'm wondering if then it might make sense to to either add a meeting in May or in September or November. It feels like, or maybe move, it seems like the annual report, or maybe move the June meeting to maybe earlier in the year or later. It feels like there's a lot happening kind of in the beginning of the year and maybe not so much towards the end of the year, when I think some of the subcommittee or ad hoc committees, a lot of the work might not be kind of that hasn't progressed that much in towards the beginning of months of the year. So maybe putting something maybe towards the end of the year, sometime like after, well, I think August looks full. But maybe something in September or October, or October's happening, but September or November. That wasn't very clear.
So staff would request that we not look at September.
Yeah.
But October is open,
Mhm.
as is December, intentionally because the work, there does tend to be more work that comes towards the end of the year as more things are being done, to give that flexibility. So certainly if there was something that you wanted to move later, or if the request is to move June to May, I'm just going to defer to Ms. Thomas to make sure that there's nothing I'm missing from a city calendar perspective. I think that would be certainly capable. The goal initially was to mirror, just for consistency's sake, the previous year's 2023 calendar year schedule, but certainly making some reasonable adjustments makes sense to staff.
Are you asking about adding another meeting or asking to add things to meetings?
Both.
Okay.
So I think moving June to May, I don't kind of know everyone else's schedule, but I don't know if that might make a little bit more sense. It seems like after June, there's break for summer, and so maybe if we have that in May, we can kind of get started and get back to it after summer, rather than kind of planning a bunch of things in June that we won't be able to work on for a little bit. And so I think moving June to May is something that it's for, and then moving maybe some like real like solid recommendations from ad hoc committees to later in the year. Moving those items to later in the year, I think might be valuable.
Chair, may I ask if it's approved for the youth substance abuse trends and prevention, did you want to move that to October or December?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure on what the timeline for that might look like right now.
The ad hoc committee on the forums, that first work and presentation of that to be adopted is going to really be the foundation for the forums. So I think it's important to shift that perhaps earlier, if that's the goal, to then open up maybe the follow-up conversations, the report on the work that was done or the forums to later in the calendar year.
Yeah, so maybe we could move the initial one to February and then maybe having an additional one after the forums later in the year. Yes.
I'm just talking about my own personal preferences. I'm uneasy with eliminating meetings, but I would like to move June to May. Simply because then we have more connection. We have a meeting in June and in January, in February, in April. In May, we've got a lot of work to do at the beginning of the year. And then we have a couple months off when everybody's away anyway. And by the end of August, everybody's coming back to get their kids in school and so on. So then we can push some things into the end of the year, which means those things we worked on hard in the first part of the. It's just a preference.
To clarify, moving June to May.
We wouldn't have a January meeting.
Well, I'm proposing we do have a January.
Okay.
I'm
just
talking
making
about
sure.
preferences.
No, I'm just making sure.
I'm trying to keep track of the suggestions. I do like the idea of moving June to May. Because I know I'll be gone. I already know that. It sounds like other people might be gone as well. So if we're not gonna have a forum anyway, maybe we can plan already for that. I'm thinking about, since I'm part of the subcommittee or the ad hoc committee on the forum on future of community policing, we're supposed to fit in three three meetings. But I think the three meetings are are they the calendar year 2024, or do they have to happen before April or May of 2020? I'm confused.
Your work plan, Member Ayar, is a fiscal year work plan. The schedule that we're looking at is a calendar year, which is inherently confusing. So there is time on the other end of the beginning of the next calendar year to add in up to 3 forums.
Okay, so the deadline to finish 3 forums is when?
It would be the end of the calendar, end of the fiscal year, which would be which would be July, or I guess June 30th of 24.
Of 24.
Yes.
I think your math is right.
Okay, yeah, I think we got that right. Here, I'm seeing a head nod.
Okay, so I've got 6 months to do 3 forums.
No, you mean 25.
25, yeah.
24.
Don't look at me, because I'm looking at you.
Or Mike, Chief, would you continue it on your work plan? That's also something that's often done, is the work that's moving it forward can be incorporated in the annual report that goes to the council for the work plan that's on a fiscal year. I think that's what's so challenging, is you have that little bit of that disconnect between your calendar and your fiscal year.
I believe I'm confusing myself, so I apologize. Referring to the staff report was for perhaps I'm confusing things or blending things together, but my understanding is that the forums is 23-24. There's a work plan item for 23-24.
Right.
So it needs to be completed, unless I'm really mixing all of these things up in my head, by mid 24. By the end of fiscal year 24.
Okay. So that probably won't happen. However, I think we could try to get one in, because I'd love to be able to have a proof point of, did we think this was good, or so we could go in with information to say, yeah, we'd like to extend this to the next fiscal year's work plan. To do that, I think then I would propose, and I feel okay proposing this because it impacts, because I would be the one showing up for it, as well as if my co-subcommittee or ad hoc committee member is amenable. I would propose moving that maybe to February to see if we could have a discussion with our staff liaison. Is that you, Captain McGee?
I believe so.
Then to see if we could get one in before the end of the current fiscal year. If we move, so that was the second point. So I don't know, Councilmember Sutter, what you think about that. It means we'd have to do some work in January.
Yeah. That's fine.
Anyone has objections to us working too hard or? Just joking. Okay, so that's that one. I have to say the June agenda, even if we move to May, it looks heavy. I just want to make sure that we've got, if there's anything that can happen to prep us, or the annual report or the work plan, I'm not sure. It seems like a lot. So, August seems like even more than a lot. It's like, welcome back, boom, here's all the stuff. So I guess more than the June one, the August one, if we could ease back in a little more gently, anything can be moved to October, I think that would be great. The other thing I'm musing about is that, I think that the forum should be on, ideally in months where we don't have a meeting, if we can map it that way, right? So that would be March. If we move the meeting to May, it wouldn't be May, it would be September. Would the forum be off limits for September, or is it just the formal meeting that couldn't happen in September?
I think that would be something that the ad hoc committee would work on, but certainly there's capacity to, as it's not something that may involve as much city staff.
Okay.
But it would be contingent on the location. If it was something where most staff is not present, we may not be able to book the standard, conference numbers or community center, et cetera. But likely those are details we can hash out.
You're saying it's not off limits, though?
It's not off limits, and certainly it makes sense to move to months that don't have.
Okay, because I'm just kind of thinking out loud on that. I think March might be too soon if we're coming back with a proposal in February to do a first one. Maybe, wait, then, maybe March. Oh, wait, then we don't have any other opportunity in the first part of the year.
And some of those, there's not a prerequisite, Maria, that the meetings have to be on months where there is not a PSAT meeting, and it may be that the recommendation that you bring to the board that they approve is to start small with a smaller meeting to design it and then circle back or grow from. So it may be a smaller scale, could be bilingual, could be something that has a smaller crowd perhaps.
That's true.
And then grows from there, but I'll leave that to obviously the ad hoc committee's
We'll talk about it.
recommendations.
I had this plan in my head and then I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work, so, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna say that August feels heavy, so I would add, if there are things that could move out a bit, I think that would be good. I'm gonna channel Derek here and say, I'd rather not have a meeting on December 12th, because that's my birthday. Yes. So I'm just gonna, thanks Derek for opening that door. In general, I've felt slightly disconnected because our meetings sometimes feel like they're 2 months apart, and it's like, what were we talking about? And so that thread is lost for me sometimes in between. So I don't know that the right answer is, let's put more meetings on the calendar because of staff capacity. I don't think it's subcommittee capacity. I think that was a misinterpretation. I remember that discussion, and it's not that. I really think it's staff capacity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's subcommittee. And I want to respect that, right? But I want to carry the thread of connection from meeting to meeting. So how do we do that? And I'm really interested in board member ideas for that. I really like the idea and support the idea of ad hoc, like formalized, agendized ad hoc committee updates. And I would encourage folks to actually bring in, here's what we're discussing in the committee, right? What do you guys think? So we actually, a lot of times it feels like we hear a lot of information, but we don't have time for discussion. We have time to give feedback, but that's not the same as discussion. And I think I'm really missing the discussion. I think things would, right, it's all about me, right? I'm sorry. I think we would all benefit from more discussion. I think things would sink in more. We'd be able to carry those threads more strongly forward. So I'm interested in other people's ideas. Does anyone else have that sense of disconnection in between meetings, or am I just getting old, or what's happening? So short of putting a meeting every month on the calendar, what else can we do to keep those connections strong months between meetings?
So I would say there have been issues of both staff and ad hoc committee capacity, depending on the committee and depending on the staff and depending on the item and the time. So that has been an issue and a challenge that we've needed to work around. But I would encourage, as long as there's not a Brown Act violation and a quorum, there's nothing that prohibits members of an ad hoc committee from discussing an item that is the function, although more structured and kind of programmatic time from staff is available. But it's not required for ad hoc committee members to discuss, nor to do research or to brainstorm about ideas. So I don't want to discourage connection and conversation and engagement. That is certainly an option. And although staff enjoys working collaboratively and providing information and answering questions, we don't need to be the conduit for all connection and don't want to be the conduit for all connection amongst the board members. That may help if we're not seen as required to be there to facilitate those conversations and those outreach opportunities.
Right. I think that could help. I think the thing about the committee is I don't think there's a need. If a committee comes in, it's like, well, we don't really have an update. I think that's okay, right? It's a safe place to say we don't really have an update because we haven't met yet or whatever, right? I don't think you have to come in with a full-fledged presentation. You could just come in verbally and say, we were talking to Trust and they want ideas of where we can outreach to. And so anybody have any ideas beyond the 10 that we gave them, right? And things like that to kind of involve folks in the subcommittee dealings before. The Clear Act one kind of caught me off guard, if I'm honest, Chief, because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot there was a subcommittee doing it. And I was like, it was kind of startled me when you came in and presented that. I was like, I had totally forgotten that there was a subcommittee doing that. I don't want to be reminded that I'm getting older, right? Because I'm forgetting these things, but how do we check in as we go along? So nothing should really be a surprise, So I'm thinking about that as well.
I kind of feel like that. And I kind of want to thank Dana for bringing this up because she brought it up a long time ago, but it kind of goes hand in hand with what she was talking about is if we provide updates with what the subcommittees are talking about at every meeting, I think that provides at least a little of the thread that you're looking for. And a little of the it brings back a little of the familiarity of what we're all discussing. At least I would hope that would take a step towards solving that problem you're trying to describe.
Something I'm curious about that we might do, I don't know if it would be an agendized item. Well, I guess it would, I don't know. Would be maybe at the end of the meeting to just really quickly recap any action items that any of us are going to take. And so I think the ad hoc committee updates would be really helpful and kind of I think as a person on ad hoc committee, I'd love to come to the group and be like, okay, this is what we're working on, and I don't really know what to do about this. And so I think that feedback would be really helpful. And maybe at the end we could circle back on all the agendized items and really think about what we are going to do either as an ad hoc committee or as staff or as the police department on any of these issues. I think then we can kind of end off on the same page before we all go do our thing and then come back having been able to kind of just look back at that checklist. I think that might be helpful if it's not too much work.
Yeah, depending on, I suppose, Chair, it really depends on the depth and the level of review and the commitment, especially if we're talking about what is the police department looking to do operationally or programmatically. That may not be something that I could answer quickly, and it really may be something that has to come back to the body of staff and be discussed about internal capacity and direction and what we have, what position, et cetera. But certainly, at least on a reasonable, attainable level, it seems, bringing those issues back, discussing them amongst yourselves seems certainly would not be impactful from my perspective, from staff commitment, et cetera. Be mindful of respecting your own time and manage that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely like high level, not like what is the police department doing, but more, I think that time that, what was it, on the follow-up report and timeline, just when you were like, oh, I'll follow up, in February, I think that was really helpful. And so like very high level things, and maybe for the ad hoc committee, it could also be like high level, but just so we all know that what we're doing going into the next meeting, I think that would be really helpful.
And just to say, staff can interject, Madam Chair, are you saying that the summary would be from each of the ad hoc committees when they are broaching, they are giving their update, they would recap, here's some of our key next action steps so that you're all aware of those follow-ups? Is that the correct frame, or are you thinking all things, including the work plan?
I'm thinking more of maybe what's on the agenda for that meeting. So if like at the beginning of the meeting, we talked about something and wanted to do something about it, maybe at the end of the meeting, we're just like, oh yeah, and I'll take the lead on this, or I'll think about this kind of. So just what's happening in the meeting, just based on what happened in the meeting. Yeah.
And something that would be like a pre-enhancement to minutes? Kind of what you're kind of thinking as a pre-recap.
Right.
That would then be solidified within the minutes.
Right, so I don't think any like materials would need to be provided. I think it would just be probably the board and the staff just kind of sharing or getting like preparing ourselves for what we're gonna do in the time between meetings.
And would that, Madam Chair, be covered in the specific work plan item, or are you proposing that at the kind of end of the meeting, that those things are brought up?
I want to make sure that it happens at every meeting, so I don't know if that's something that we need to put into the agenda. It doesn't really seem like we would do anything about it, so I don't think it's like we need to take action about it at the moment. But I do want to make sure it happens at every meeting, so I'm not sure where that would fit in.
May I ask, Ms. Thomas, from your experience and wisdom, is this something that a chair can then inquire and direct during a work plan item to circle back?
I think this would require additional discussion. And also, Chief, I think the other caution I have is that I'm not familiar with any model that's kind of reflective like that. So we'd want to make sure we got a best practice or some background to make sure we did that smoothly and cleanly for you as well. So I think it probably requires a little bit of additional staff time and agendizing it as a separate discussion item if that is a priority on behalf of the entire body.
I mean, please share your opinion.
I like the idea of people funding that. Coming from the corporate world, there are some good things about it. One is like, what actions did people sign up to take? What did we hear? What's happening? And then the next meeting, you go through and say, where are we with these things, right? And it does provide that thread as well of, oh yeah, you said you were going to do this. Where are we with it? What's the next step, right? I really like that idea. So I would support if there is a best known method to do that, having something like that. I think it helps with accountability, and it helps with feeling like there's tangible action happening. And I think both of those things are good. Thank you for suggesting it.
Yes, I agree.
Chair, just so I understand, are you saying continuing from one meeting to the next, or contained within the one individual meeting?
I think what I'm thinking is just at the end, reflecting on what we all kind of think about what we're gonna do moving forward between that meeting, and I think that would naturally kind of come up in, maybe not in the next meeting, but in like, if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this by April, like it would probably come up by April. And I think in terms of like, if things need to get on the agenda, that's something that we would work on separately. So not necessarily like if we have to check in on these action items in the next meeting, more so just putting it out there. And so that we remember to think about them again.
You weren't advocating checking in on them to kind of revisit and see where we are and add or like cross things off, or did I misunderstand?
I think I was thinking, because I wanna, like, we have so much stuff in our meetings. I wanna make sure that like we discuss what we're going to do, like action items we're gonna take. And that those action items, when needed, come back into the meetings. But not necessarily that at the beginning of every meeting, we like check back in on those, because I think that might take more time, and I think that might already be covered in the meeting agenda. I would also definitely encourage that, like, if there are stuff that need to go into the meeting agendas, like if you're like, oh, I worked on this, I need to share, to make sure to reach out, I guess, to me or to Kimberly, on those items, but I don't think that it needs to be put in to check back in.
Madam Chair, if you can just ask a clarifying question. I think a couple of things is you're wanting the ad hoc committees to kind of do a recap of what their next action steps are. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, but I don't know if that's limited to ad hoc committees. I think sometimes we have.
What's your
random
broader
things.
vision of the scope? Is it also the work plan, or what clarify that for me?
Right, I think it's. How do I clarify? I think sometimes during our discussion action items, there are things that come up that should, or that are going to happen. Like recommendations or other things.
Like related to agendized items?
Yes, related to what was
Okay.
on the agenda for that meeting.
Okay.
Not necessarily like broader like work plan so far. But because ad hoc committee updates would be agendized, then the ad hoc committees would also share. But it's just what's agendized for that meeting.
Okay. I would suggest that we bring this forward as probably one of the items if we are having I don't know if we can prepare for that enough by the February meeting, Chief, but we can definitely take a look at that just to further discuss this in depth, since it wasn't carved out as a particular call out. And then that way we can discuss it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think that would be appropriate, and we can see if there are any best practices that we might have readily available. Our city clerk manages and provides guidance on a number of meetings. We can definitely do a check-in with her and see if there's some guidance that we can offer.
I really appreciate that. I know I just kind
Sure.
of threw that out
No,
there.
not a worry.
I would also add, it might be good to know what subcommittee meetings are happening between meetings. So at the end of the meeting, and I'm not sure if this is what you're suggesting or not, but if we could sort of recap or at least announce, in between, at the end of a meeting, last maybe before the comments or whatever, between now and our next meeting, such and such subcommittee is going to happen, such and such ad hoc committee is going to happen. Not necessarily the dates, but just saying that they're going to meet so that folks know that they're going to meet. I don't know if that provides any benefit to anybody or not, but
I think you could do that in item 6. You can certainly do that as a part of item 6. You can share that X number of meetings, because you're not taking action, you're just advising. You're purely informationally sharing something. So perhaps that could be something the board might like to consider.
Yeah, I think I like kind of just voicing the cadence, I guess, of ad hoc committee meetings. And I think we could do that during share. Yeah. Or during.
So now you'll have that benefit that it will be on every agenda, and so you'll have that opportunity.
I'd like to propose that, actually, not because it's on my birthday, but that December's meeting actually happens in November. I'd like a little space to get some work done before the holidays. And if the meeting is December 12th, one, I won't be here, but number 2, I'm not gonna get any work done before the holidays start. There's a week, right? So I prefer, the same reason that we're moving June to May, I'd recommend December moves to November.
I feel like November's, I think that's a difficult time for me, for a lot of people, at least with family coming in, and that third week is pretty intense. Sorry.
Oh, does it would it have to?
Just because of Thanksgiving, so then
If it was the week before Thanksgiving, it's still hard.
I mean, you're bringing it closer to the October, is that right? No, this, September, October, so we're not meeting in September.
Not in September, but it's proposed October.
Just, for me, those 2 months, September and November, are just awful already. So, and I get it, my birthday's the 11th, so I totally get it, but same. Happy birthday.
Oh my goodness, yeah, you're right.
I think I understand what you're saying about the holidays. It
Yeah, I
does
mean,
come up.
if it was the 13th or the 11th, it wouldn't matter because it's once again, we have a meeting and then we're gonna forget about it till February. And that's kind of what happens, or we'll resume in January sometime, right? And I'd rather for me, there's things that come out of these meetings that I want to take action on immediately after the meeting that I won't have that space to do that. And then the momentum kind of goes. So that's what I'm like, is there a different way to structure it?
Sorry, I'm just looking at a calendar. I mean, like personally, either works, November or December, but it kind of depends.
They're both complicated.
Does no one have further thoughts? On November or December?
I prefer December, but December,
Yeah,
I'm just.
I don't know, I'm kinda, don't wanna know if we're gonna just move everything around, so I'm partial to if they've printed out already, I don't know.
From a staff perspective, I don't think the fourth Thursday of either November nor December would work just based on the holidays. They both present challenges, frankly, related to travel and holidays. So I don't know that there is a clear, at least for the police department side, that scheduling that would work easier or worse.
We would have the same challenges from the city manager's office side.
Frankly, both complicated.
Yeah.
But she's, I think, saying or asking if we could move it up 1 week in November to the 3rd, right? Is that what you're?
Well,
it's currently what she's framing.
Yeah, but you were saying that it's still complicated.
I mean, both months are complicated, as Joan would
Yeah.
has said so.
I just want some time to work before we disappear for the holidays, because then it'll be like a meeting and then we're gone. And so again, that thread, that sense of connection, I'm just trying to preserve that. And so I'm kind of doing this chess piece moving to see how to do that. So wondering about that.
Remember, if there was I'm not sure if I caught the question about moving earlier in November. I heard the 3rd, but I'm not sure if.
Third weekend, the third week, third Thursday.
Yeah.
It would be the 21st.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. Prior to Thanksgiving holiday.
Before Thanksgiving, or would that be the second?
I think it's the, let's take a look.
It's on the 28th in 2024.
Is that Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Okay.
So the third week would be the 21st.
So it'd be the 21st.
Yes, Member Polsky?
Could I move that we take a vote on whether we prefer a meeting on the 3rd week of November, or keep the meeting on December 12th.
Like, is it possible for you to do a meeting on the 21st?
Yeah, I think that we could. I don't see any, there's no impediment that I'm aware of, but I'm also speaking for a staff member who's not here. So there's that challenge. So I would just add with a caveat pending your regular staff member. If there would be any modification, she would certainly let you know. But I don't see anything that jumps out at me as being a potential challenge. One of our complications would be room assignment. We have other commissions and committees or other meetings that occur here. So just something to factor in. Some of those logistics, we can usually make different things work. Michael is a magic worker there, but that's just something additional that we would consider.
May I ask, we have a motion, so we should probably address that, but
You have first.
yeah. Do we have to answer this now or can it be tabled until our staff member gets back?
I think we want to establish the direction on the tentative agenda list to be able to have it largely intact. If there is a modification that's needed, she will certainly raise that for you when she's back in the approximated March timeframe.
I think that because it doesn't seem like there's much of a preference for November, December, I do like the idea of being able to work on things for a little bit longer before we go on holiday. So I guess I'm just proposing that we do it in November. I think maybe right now it looks difficult just because we don't really know what's on the agenda for those yet. But I mean, I'm sure we'll find out. So I propose that we do it in November.
But we have a motion on
the third.
So you want to second her motion?
Yes, I do. That's me agreeing.
So you're seconding. Okay.
And Madam Chair, would you like to take you've got a couple of other modifications, the January, February, the June to May. Would you like all of them as one comprehensive motion, or would you like to take each separately?
I think one together, and then do we need to make motions for like the individual tentative agenda items that we kind of propose?
No, that you don't. Staff is taking in depth the feedback on that. I think that we'd want to make sure we reflect that approximately into the record. And then I think on the timing, I think that's important that we get that pretty clear so that you also all have that and we can ensure it's on your calendars.
My motion is only for the October, December 12th or November
21st.
Yeah, it's only for, that's the only issue I'm moving on.
She's not willing to amend her motion for the other ones because she doesn't support them.
We can make another motion.
Can I ask a clarifying question about June to May? The election is in June. Is it possible to move that up to May, or is there, if the election was in June of this year, does it have to be in June of next year?
You're asking the
Chair, vice chair election?
Chair, vice chair.
Actually, I don't know past precedent for why it's occurring there. It usually occurs on a fiscal year basis is usually the standard, but Mike, you might have greater visibility on that than I do.
And I may, but I don't.
Okay, well, we will be happy to follow up on that and get you some.
I just want to make sure if we move it to May that we don't hear, oh, we've got to meet in June for this election.
Right.
That would be a little.
Well, I would think that action could be clearly noted with an effective date.
Yes. All right, do I make a motion? I feel like I'm still unfamiliar with.
We still have a motion on the floor.
We already have
Nobody
a
seconded.
first.
Wait, so is your
She
motion
seconded
to
it.
Oh,
vote
thank
on
you.
which one
Second.
works better?
My
or to-
motion is to vote on whether we will have a meeting on the third week in November, or we will keep the December 12th.
Proposed,
Date.
staff proposed.
Yes. I move that we have a vote among the 7 members here.
And if you'd like a full roll call, we can. If not, we can also do by hands being raised,
I
since
would
you
like
might
a
have a
full roll
couple of these. Okay, full roll call if the chair.
Yeah, can I do a second? I second.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, okay, great. Okay, so then we're gonna, that would be Chair Wang.
I vote for November. I didn't know if it was a yes or no question.
You vote for one. Yes.
Yeah,
That
November.
was my motion.
Okay, I
Vote for November, December.
Yes.
For the modification, I vote for the modification. Member AR, Member Brodowski,
December.
Member Frank,
December.
Member Langton.
Yeah, I'm probably December.
As we're going along, and then Member Souter.
November.
There we go.
So we're sorry.
No, I think that,
Oh, you got it November?
Get the
yeah, I think that.
Okay.
Okay.
Apologize.
Okay. So then what we would need to do there is we'd need to bring that back to you in terms of a final date, once we have your other member with us to be able to make any modification to that. So I think at this point, we're going to likely, Mike, Chief, need to take in the recommendation, at least this one, and you may have another one or two. And then we'll need to re-agendize the item and bring it back to you before we solidify everything.
Once we
So the
table it, like I
recommendation
said.
is. You actually said that earlier. So the recommendation to you is to meet in November instead of December, is that correct? Okay.
But you're not, as a body, not able to, get that final determination of which date would work well for everyone. So then we'd need to make that modification later.
Okay, Chair.
And then there was another modification.
Yeah, Chair,
There
I
were
make
two
a
others.
motion that we combine the January and February meetings and that we moved the June meeting to May.
In that motion, is that to combine it for February?
I'm sorry?
That we're gonna have January, February, and February.
Yes, January and February combined to February,
Yes,
and then moving June to May.
I second the motion.
So we have to agree with the two in order to say yes.
Correct.
I'm clear on that? So that's the combining, moving the January to February and also the June adjustment to May.
Yes.
Before we move on to vote, can I have a discussion? Is that a deal breaker for you?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to amend my motion. I'm amending my motion to just include only the January and February merging of meetings to February.
So we're just
Also
one item.
second your motion.
You just seconded?
Yeah, could we do a raise hand vote?
You can,
Okay,
you
let's do
absolutely
that.
can, as long as we read into the record what the ratio was.
Sounds good.
Which we will. So if you'd like to, on that item, that would be the adjustment from January to February only.
Correct.
And that motion carries.
And can I make a motion to move June to May?
Second.
Okay, sounds good.
And again, you can also do a hand vote. Next, we're just getting your feedback. Then we'll need to recap it all for the record.
Whatever the majority is.
And that one also carries. So what we'd like to do is definitely for the record, reflect those two changes that are modified. And Chief, if you're open to this, let me know what you think of this idea, is that we can consider the work plan intact, and then we would have some flexibility. We wouldn't need to immediately bring it back on the December, November, because we have a little flexibility at the tail end of the calendar. And then when your permanent staff is back, if there's any modification she might like to adjust and make sure she meets that timeline, we could leave that in her hands and she can bring the item before you in your spring meeting to ensure you stay on track and your schedule is clean. Does that sound like a workable solution?
It does. It sounds like sound advice. Yes.
Gives you a little bit of flexibility as well. And so you'll just have that latter portion of your year.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, of course, of course, of course.
All right, item 5.3, wait. Oh. Yes, this item is closed.
This item, I think what we'd like to make sure and do is, first, Chief, any additional modifications on the agenda items that we need any clarification on?
Just to be clear, Member Thomas, sorry,
Staff?
staff, the dates need to be firmed, but an item, for example, the future policing forums, if that's being moved to February, that does not need to be voted on. That's something that we can shift as long as the date is solid. Is that correct?
I believe those dates are not fully fleshed out, right? So they will be brought forward as a part of the subcommittee process.
Correct.
So yes, so that's a considered ongoing work. And then I think the schedule, as we've talked about, with the exception of the December period, everything would be as staff has recommended in the report, with the exception of the January, February modification. So you have the January, February carried, and did we do the June to May? That didn't carry. It did carry. Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay, great. So the June to May, the January to February of modification, and then held in abeyance for future consideration is the December, November.
That's my understanding.
Just ensuring that's in the record. And then I had that we did a solid single motion, but you've done and offered enough feedback to staff that I think we have clarity for the minutes, but let me do a double check with Michael. Okay.
Is there anything else you need to do for this item?
Nope.
Item 5.3, fiscal year work item, ad hoc committee information. Police Chief Mike Canfield will give a verbal report summarizing where this item left off.
She didn't. Oh, one caution. I honestly can't recall. Did we open the item when she had opened it earlier on? Okay, it had been opened earlier.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just a quick reminder or a circle back to the work plan items that were adopted at the October meeting. During that October meeting, the board made a preference to circle back to address the potential adding of additional staff, or rather additional board members, to the two ad hoc committees. Member Langton wasn't present, and it was the board's preference that he see if he would like to fulfill a position on either of the two boards or ad hoc committees rather. And as I recall, Member Frink was interested in some of the ad hoc committees, but really wanted to give Member Langton the opportunity before he made a selection himself. So the preference was.
That's not really the correct characterization.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I
told me the
volunteered.
characterization,
Yeah.
he volunteered.
But I said I would take it if he didn't want to do it.
He did.
Thank you for the clarification.
He thought I was very skilled for this particular task.
So
I don't object.
as a refresher, the two ad hoc committees were formed. One was for the youth substance abuse trends and prevention resources, and that is member Rodowski and member Wang. Apologies. The other ad hoc committee is for the forums on the future of community policing, and that is member Souter and member Ayar. Those are the two ad hoc committees.
That's what are you telling me I should do?
I was talking about the forums when
Yeah,
community policing forums.
so that's not here.
No.
So it was something else.
That is, so the two options are both for the forums on the future of community policing, and as a refresher, and although it was covered in the previous staff report, the refresher on those essentially is that they are opportunities to address and create conversation and kind of a forum style dialogue related to significant policing issues, both nationally and regionally. And there'll be up to 3 presentations, community presentations for those.
Okay, and are you looking for me to just pick one, or am I supposed?
You can pick both if you want.
Oh, what were the two again?
I believe, Member Langton, your preference, you could pick none, or you could serve on both. I think if it serves the board. And they were, the two were one on youth substance and abuse trends. The other was on the community forums. And I can read the subcommittee work for each as it was reflected in the staff report if you'd like.
I think I'd be willing to volunteer for one, and I think it would be the community forum. Community policing.
Board members with comments. And we need to open this item for public comment. If anyone of the public would like to provide comment on this item, if so, please use the blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature for $1. Awesome. I will now bring this back to the PSAP for discussion. Do any board members have any comments? So I that Member Lincoln joins the ad hoc committee on forms of future police.
Second.
Good. And then I will call the vote. Chair Wang?
James?
We can just call it. Yes, yeah, it's okay.
If you prefer, sure.
I was just hands.
Well, let's just do a roll call.
Sure.
We already started. Let's just do it.
Just wanna throw all motions
Copy that.
here.
Well, okay, cool.
It's
Copy that.
offering
Thank you.
feedback, so it always works a little bit. So.
My apologies.
No worries. So Chair Wang,
Yes.
Member Yar,
Yes.
and then Member Radowski.
Yes.
Member Frank,
Yes.
Member Langton,
Sure.
Member Souter. And that motion carries.
Thank you.
What if you had said no?
I know, I was thinking of it. I was thinking of saying no.
If you change your mind, I'll say.
That's good. I have.
Alright, okay, and moving on. the last-
But I think we still need another member on the other ad hoc committee. Is that not correct?
So to answer your question, Member Frank, no, it is not correct. You do not need to have 3 board members on an ad hoc committee. 2 is adequate.
Should we ask if anyone wants to join?
I feel like we should wait till we have the full board back to do that.
I believe that everyone else, was also here when we formed the board when we formed the ad hoc committees during the last meeting.
That's
So
true. Well, yeah, he wasn't here.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, like, everyone else who might want to be on.
Member Tang had expressed an interest to pause and not join one of the 2 ad hoc committees in this iteration. She had specifically expressed that, so she did weigh in, as I recall.
Yes.
I'll leave it be for now.
Okay, amazing. All right, the last item is board staff comments, questions, and committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the PSAP at this time. Do any PSAP members or staff have comments or questions? I have an update. For the youth substance abuse ad hoc committee, we met with, as in Joan and I and Kimberly and oh my gosh, met with some researchers at Stanford and Berkeley who are interested in helping us look at some data for the committee. I think right now we're just really working on like defining what kind of the landscape looks like and kind of what data we have and who we should kind of focus the resources on. And so it's very broad, but we did meet with them and are starting to figure out how we can work with them, and they're gonna help a lot with kind of literature reviews on just like what's out there in terms of how we can best address this issue in Mountain View. So that's exciting. Do any other board members have? Yes.
I have a question. In that meeting with the researchers, I didn't note down that we gave them that they gave us or we gave them a timeline. When will they deliver something to us?
Yeah.
Was there any mention of that, or was it left in the air?
I think we also have to do some stuff, and they are also going to. I think first on our end, just kind of like compiling like what data we already have access to, and as an ad hoc committee figuring out like what other information we might need. And then from there, I think then we'll reach back out to them and ask some questions on like, what do you think we need to go look at based on their expertise. And I think at the same time, they're trying to find out if they have like a PhD student who's interested in helping with this. And so they'll also reach out, but I think a lot of that is on just like whatever we're able to kind of figure that out and also meet as a.
But we didn't put any dates, right?
So no dates.
I have nothing down. Maybe when we get back in May or June.
I think that we in May or June. I think that we can meet as an ad hoc committee and figure out, or I can just email you. We can discuss. Okay.
Because I'd like to push it along.
Yeah, then we can. Our next meeting is
We didn't put it,
We
and we have
can
no
figure
date.
it out, we will
Yeah.
figure it out. There'll be a date.
I, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that, I got invited to the Santa Clara County, and I was a COVID ambassador for the county, so now apparently I'm a fentanyl ambassador or something. A fentanyl avoidance, I don't know what it is, but I couldn't go to that meeting because I had this meeting. But I just wanna say if there's anything that comes out of that, I will forward it to you guys.
Oh,
So,
that would be very good.
because I was like, what's this, right? And why do you still have my name, Santa Clara County, but okay, so,
So you were involved in the meeting?
no, it was at the same time as this meeting, but I got the invite, it says Santa Clara County ambassadors, and then it had fentanyl abuse or something like that, so, or fentanyl. So I don't know what it was, but it might be useful to you, so I just wanted to flag, or if, I don't know if you guys know anything about what I'm talking about?
I believe the county is doing training associated with the new nasal Narcan option because it's much more user-friendly for responders who aren't trained. And so I believe I recall of the many emails I get, seeing something in reference to that, member Ayar.
And it would have been on Zoom, it was because it was on Zoom.
I don't know if that was Zoom, but I do know there was some communication maybe within the last 4 weeks or so on that topic. So we shared it with our community-based organizations. So you might have even gotten it twice from city side.
No, yeah, I know which one you're talking about. That one-
Yes,
I
that's
think
the
it-
one that I know about.
Okay, no, I think this seemed like it was something else.
Ah,
Anyway, I'm just curious if anybody else knew about it and could explain what it was, but once I find out, I will forward it if it's helpful.
All right, if there are no other comments or questions, we will move on to the final item of tonight's agenda. Adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 9:10 p.m. Which feels like a record.
Happy holidays, everybody.